Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round one of the 2025 AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship for the first half of this year. It is great to be back, folks. It's been a while since I've been on the microphone for the AROC Racing League, so always good to see some Italian machinery out on track here. Just over 10 minutes to go in this qualifying session here at the Hungaroring for round one. A nice, tight, twisty, technical track. If you're in a Formula car, it's maybe a little bit kind of more open, a little bit faster for your average British touring car, although this is, of course, a world touring car, if you will. So still a very good venue nonetheless. Plenty of technical corners, some decent speed, elevation changes, and some overtaking opportunities in the slightly slower cars as well. So really all to play for here this evening. And speaking of all to play for, it's going to be David Shelley who's playing for some good results here this evening. Defending champion, of course, taking that championship on his rookie debut season, if you will. It was a fantastic run. Some great battling later on through the season, but in the end it was David Shelley who won out. And here he is on the super soft tyre at the moment, taking a slightly wider line. I think abandoning this lap. There he goes, allowing the next car through. Looking good finally in a livery. I did try various times throughout the previous season to get a livery on David Shelley's car. Wasn't able to, unfortunately, but I am pleased to report he's now running one in this running for 2025. So we're already off to a good start. Got a decent number of drivers here this evening so far. Might see a couple more trickle in. Rosie Oliver setting some decent pace in qualifying, although it looks like that lap might have been abandoned. Oh no, it wasn't, sorry. She just wasn't able to get another one in, so hopefully we'll see her return for the end of the session. Willingless, unfortunately, can't make it this evening, but we'll hope to see him in further rounds. That is Andy Craker out in front of David Shelley there in the blue and red liveried car. Let's see who else we can find out on track. We're going to go on board with Steve Knight with his distinctive purple roll cage. It's actually the first time I think I've taken notice of that. That might be owing to some slight changes to the graphics that I've been making in the background to try and make it a more pleasant viewing experience for you all. In the top right hand corner of the screen you will see some new bits of info for us, some conditions regarding the track, the temperature out on track, and wind conditions as well. These aren't akin to what we're seeing in real life in Budapest at the moment, because I can confirm, although it is lovely at certain times of the year, in the middle of January, it's not quite 25 degrees out in Hungary, although we can hope to one day have similar weather returning to us in the next few months. So track conditions, we've got optimum track conditions, as I say, 35 degrees out on the tarmac with a very gentle breeze, so that shouldn't affect the drivers at all, really. So perfect conditions for these drivers to get to grips with these cars and start setting some laps. It is still David Shelley with the lead of this session, going away from the super soft tyres and now jumping onto the soft tyres, who leads with a 151.283. That's half a second ahead of Andy Craker, a 151.772, who had the measure of pretty much everyone in the Winter Tasman series. He put in a mighty effort to pretty much walk away with it. Willingless, trying to claw it back. Myself very early on, trying to put in a good shift there, but unfortunately both my own skills and technology letting me down on that front, and unfortunately I wasn't able to compete. Although if you want to hear more about my miserable running and failure as a sim racing driver, that will be coming in the next Alfa Romeo driver issue in the sim racing column. So there you will hear about my woes and failures and all of the reasons as to why I like to stay behind the microphone instead of usually jumping out on track, because it all goes wrong. Not that it ever goes perfectly right when I'm in control of things and on the microphone anyway, but, you know, it's certainly better here, which, you know, says a great many things. Anyway, we're out on track with a Jack Hodson, who's just set a nice lap there to go 156.416, running the softs as well. Guy Swarbrick currently the only car on that super soft tyre. Jack Hodson up into 6th. Guy Swarbrick running in 7th at the moment. Now, I am pleased to report I am back in my correct commentary car with a slightly different livery for this year, so thank you for that, Guy. Let's see actually if we can have a quick look at it, why don't we? No, that doesn't look to be the case. Maybe oh no, I can take a screenshot instead, and then I can turn on the leaderboard. It's all gone wrong anyway. In fact, I might be able to in just a moment, so we'll see there. I can get rid of all of the wrong leaderboards. There we go. All in complete control, business as usual, as you would expect from me at this point. Here we go. Yeah, it's actually I think, a slightly different livery. I can't quite get into free mode, but there is some... You will be able to... There we go. That's what I was after. So we still got that checkerboard livery. Not that this is the most important thing in the world. Qualifying is currently ongoing, but we got that checkered flag accent on the back, and then the black OP Oils livery there with all of the correct sponsors on it. A fantastic looking car. We briefly thought that I might end up running in the Giulietta because I tried to get in the car and the setter wouldn't quite let me. So I just kind of asked everyone in the session, oh, they're going to be a spare Giulietta? Kind of spare Giuliettas lying around? And they said, go for it. My fear was it would put me out on the start-finish line. It didn't in the end, and it put me in a 75. So all is well, familiar territory for Reeve. Anyway, just over 5 minutes to go in this session now. Not too much happening out on track, although we are starting to see more and more cars leaving the pits now. All the change happening in the low end of the field. Guy Swarbrick was on for a bit of a stormer there, but unfortunately had to retire from the session. That might just be him jumping back into the pits, so we'll wait and see for that one. But Jack Hodson with a nice improvement on this lap so far. Green mini sectors throughout, or sorry, just green sectors throughout. He improves to a 155.390. Behind him then, it will be Steve Knight, that is running in P7 at the moment at 157.734. Rosie Oliver crosses the line there to start her next fastest lap, and we wish a look on this one. I haven't seen Rosie at the Hungaroring, I believe. I might have just missed that round, but hopefully she puts on a bit of a show for us, because she certainly looks like she is going to be putting on a show, because that is a fantastic livery on that car. I do like the blue and the green livery. We haven't seen it as much as I would have liked, but hopefully we'll get to see more of it in 2025, because it is a very vibrant, fantastic looking car there. But let's have a quick look at David Kelly out in front of 151.225, the new fastest lap of the session. Actually lost out through Sector 2 and Sector 3. Sector 4, quite a unique circuit in this regard, with a 30.8 sector time there. So going purple in that final sector really did make all of the difference. It is Sector 1 and Sector 4 our longest sectors out of track here at the Hungaroring. So that is going to be, if you can get your purple sectors in there, that is going to make all the difference, unless it goes catastrophically wrong in the mid part of the lap. Let's go back on board though with Jack Hodson, who might be showing on the timing tower as on the softs. That's because he is on the softs. That is poor reading comprehension on Reeves from there. I saw his little driver number in the left-hand screen to myself. You guys can't see that. And I saw the number 55, and I thought that said super soft. So there's my reminder to go and see the optician. Anyway, we are seeing a few changes out in the pack now. Matt Daly at 151.8 so far in this session goes purple on the final sector last time round. What can he do through this first middle sector? I can tell you, coming out of the first corner, the first couple of corners, actually it's just counted as the one, he's up by 0.6 of a second, flying along at the moment. His delta's looking strong. Let's see as he comes towards the end of sector 1 in around about 10 seconds. We dart down through turn 3, drop to the lowest point of the circuit for us to climb all the way back up once again. I think there's actually another elevation drop before you run down towards the end of turn 10, turn 11. Going a little bit wide is Matt Daly. That is going to cost him. That does cost him. It cost him 0.2 of a second exactly, and that might compromise him throughout the rest of the lap. 3 minutes to go in this session. I'm going to jump on board instead with Andy Craker, trading purple sectors with David Kelly out at the front end of the running. It's a 20.8 through sector 2 for Andy Craker in a blue and red livery car. It's actually primarily white, but it certainly looks apart. Once again, some fantastic liveries as ever, so thank you very much, if I can get my words out properly, to all of those who put the effort in behind the scenes. Tight lock up there for Andy Craker running through the right-hander as we head up now towards turn 13, a very iconic part of this circuit. A slight overtaking opportunity here if you play your cards right. If you just get a nose in, it can work out before you have that long sweeping right-hander, comparatively at least, where you run back onto the start-finish straight. Bit of a tyre killer, that final part of the lap. But if you look after your tyres well and you keep the momentum going well through that final corner, you will be rewarded. You can carry that speed all the way down the hill into turn 1 once again. And Andy Craker crosses the line. He does improve. It's a 151.631, a nice improvement there, getting closer to David Kelly. But the question is, will it be close enough? We'll just have to stay tuned and find out, folks. Up next, it will be Jack Hodson running through that final sector himself now, and up the hill of the final corner once more. P5 at the moment in this session, 154.652. He comes across the line in just a second. Two setter 154.8. 151.28 there. That is a very nice improvement indeed. And actually, that doesn't go on the board. It should have been a 154.6 because it was going to be an improvement, but unfortunately it looks to be an illegal lap there. So he's fallen foul of track limits at some point and has to go again. That means this will be Jack Hodson's final fast lap attempt. He won't make it round to the checkered flag in time to set another one, so it really has to count here. In fact, it's going to be everyone's final lap attempt, and that is over for Jack Hodson, out of the track limits into the grass, and a disaster to round out his session. Still P5, a very decent result, but he could have had more, I suspect. Had some great momentum towards the end of that session. Coming up next to cross line, it will be Steve Knight. He crosses line, stays 8th, and then it's going to be Alan Matthews coming up in just a moment. 152.287 to beat. We wait with bated breath as he crosses the line there. Does not improve, loses out ever so slightly and stays where he is in P4 at the moment. Up next then, it's going to be Andy Craker, and this is the fight really for the big scoring positions, that front row fight to start race 1. Andy Craker heads around the right-hander, up the hill, back onto the throttle. He's looking good on the deltas, but what can he do as he crosses the line? He cannot improve in the end. It's a 151.7, leaving the only man to cross the track yet will be Matt Daly, a 151.873. He crosses the line and does pip Andy Craker to the post there. It is Matt Daly in P2 with a front row start. Only 300tenths of a second. No, sorry. It's 300ths of a second to take P2 away from Andy Craker there. And what a drive in the end that was for Matt Daly. I think he actually did cross the line. Both him and Alan Matthews crossed the line with just enough time to get another lap in. So we will stay on board to see if he does improve. But it will be a very tall order with a set of tyres that have already completed one lap. Not sure if he'll have the fuel on board as well. Can he make up 4/10 and challenge David Jelly for that podium? Not that podium, sorry, that pole position here in this session. We'll just have to see it a little bit scruffy over the curbs. The curbs slightly unforgiving here at the Hungaroring. Certainly for a Formula car, especially so for a road-based touring car. Let's see what Matt Daly can do as we run through turn 6, turn 7. The tight kink in the what would otherwise be a pretty straight section of the track. What can he do? Up next, though, it will be Alan Matthews, actually, who comes across the line there, just going a little bit deep into the corner. He can veer it off, though. He might just be able to save it. See a lot of front axle being turned into that car there. Back onto the throttle. Matt Daly gives up, retires from that session. Alan Matthews crosses the line. He does not improve. In fact, no, he does improve. It's a 152.015. Not enough to make it up towards P3, but still an impressive lap nonetheless. And that is it for qualifying here for round 1 of the AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship in 2025. Up next, it will be the races, so don't go anywhere. In a few moments, we'll be on the grid ready for race 1. Well, here we are on the grid, ladies and gentlemen, ready for race one of round one of the AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship for 2025 here at the Hungaroring, our first race of the season. I sure do hope it's going to be a good one, and I imagine that will very much be the case. Timing tower's slightly having a bit of a wobble, but that's okay. We're ready to get going. David Chelly on the front row alongside Matt Daly, who just scored that P2 at the very end of the session, as well as Andy Craig, Alan Matthews, Paul Millman, our top five. We do now have Siegfried Light on the gantry, a couple of seconds to go until launch, and we are away for race one here at the Hungaroring. A good start, though, for Matt Daly, who seemed to negate that wheel spin, keep it under control, and has now got a nose out in front as we head down towards that first corner. There's David Chelly in the middle here, but watch out for Andy Craig. He might try and hang something around the outside here. Alan Matthews taking that inside line, a secure P4 for him, but it's Matt Daly taking the lead, running into that first corner on lap one. A nice, clean move, a fantastic way to start his race. He takes control now, and now it's all down to David Chelly to try and do the work to get back past. We saw these two battling toe-to-toe at various points throughout the championship last year. Now both suited in yellow liveried cars. They are going to battle toe-to-toe right in race one, so it's going to be a good fight, I think, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, Andy Craker and Alan Matthews enjoying a bit of a battle here, all running out wide, where I think the drivers have found with the limit of the track limit, if you will. And they are utilising the track surface to its maximum, is how I'd like to phrase that. Jack Hodson, meanwhile, breaking back a little bit from Alan Matthews, but very much under pressure from Paul Millman. I should add, everyone in this race on the soft compound tyres. These tyres should last perfectly fine till the end of the race. We might see the mediums get used every now and again, but usually it's the softs that are pretty secure. And we didn't quite catch this early on, but a disastrous start for Rosie Oliver by the looks of things. She is able to continue on, so hopefully she closes up and still gets to enjoy a bit of battling at some point. I think we found the issue there with the timing tower. Let me see if I can rectify that for you very slowly. It should sort itself out in a moment, but we're going to be side by side here with Matt Daly and David Chelly. David Chelly seeing a gap in the inside, Matt Daly not really wanting to give it to him. And there we go, door to door, door banging, rubbing his racing, typical touring car stuff really. As we head back onto the start finish straight, have a look at the medical centre. What a nice medical centre. You've seen it plenty of times. You might see it again. We're back on board though with Matt Daly, who's staying in that slipstream now. As we head down towards turn one, they dart across the circuit. This is gripping stuff, folks. As we see now, David Chelly taking that inside of the corner, forcing Matt Daly to go the long way round, pushing him wide on exit, very elbows out driving, to say that is typical race car driver stuff. That's what we like to see, isn't it? It's fantastic action. Matt Daly then, late on the brakes, sees the gap open up on the inside, forces himself to the outside of the circuit to box off David Chelly, and this is going to be a fantastic battle. I hope it continues on even longer still. What's David going to do now as we see him having a look around the left hand to see if he can get a nose in? That will give him the outside of the course though, so he might just have to choose and wait for his moment to pounce and take the position. Small lockups for all the drivers actually as we head in to the mid-sector of the circuit. And under control now for Matt Daly, who takes the lead of this race, but that question is for how long, because he goes slightly wide. That's cost him in terms of speed, and David Chelly takes the position back. That was actually run through turn 6, turn 7 there. Matt Daly losing out this time, but actually clawing it back potentially as he hangs it around the outside here. No, he has to back out because that is well defended by David Chelly this time around. Constant crash warnings on my timing screen, folks. Just constantly pinged 1 mile an hour, 2 mile an hour, which means that they're not being unfair. They're just using all of the space that they absolutely can, and then just a little bit more as well. Proper old school racing. It's what these touring cars promote. Fantastic racing. So if you want to get involved, do get involved at the AROC Racing Leagues. It's good to have even more folks getting involved. It's fantastic stuff. Just look at all this action as we head round the right hander now, back onto that start finish straight. Matt Daly sizing up his opponent, using as much of the track as he does, going even over the white lines there to try and see if there's a way past, see what the momentum is looking like. He's in that slipstream, doesn't seem to be gaining all that much though, it must be said, in the start finish straight. We might see what his sector time looks like towards the end of sector 1, because it is fairly dominated by runs down the straight here. You've got obviously a slight downhill run through the long straight on the start of the lap, and you've got a slightly shorter straight here, but it does have more of a drop in elevation. A very tricky braking zone to negotiate there, but it does open up to an overtaking opportunity if you play your cards right. Running down through turn 3, and a slight rise in the elevation up towards turn 4 and turn 5 now, as we see a bit of a lock-up potentially creeping in. No, I think that was just the tyres scrubbing across the surface, actually lack of grip. David Chelly runs ever so slightly wide. That allows Matt Daly to go side by side with him now. Who has more momentum? That's the big question here. There seems to be a pretty momentum-focused circuit if you're in these touring cars. David Chelly not wanting to relent there, and that is now David back into the lead of this race. But we know, folks, that this is certainly not coming to an end at any time soon. This battle, it could go on forever and ever, and I hope it does. Let's see as they head further into this race now. Meanwhile, slightly further behind, we can still see the battle out in front, because not that far at all in all things considered, it is Andy Craker, in P3, just half second ahead of Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews still keeping him very close indeed. There's 152.43 for Alan Matthews on that last lap of 152.41 for Andy Craker. Meanwhile, Paul Millman only a few seconds further back. Then we have Steve Knight, Jack Hodson, Guy Swarbrick, and Rosie Oliver rounding out the field. Rosie, I believe, in the pits, so an unfortunate start to the season for Rosie. But we head back onto the start-finish straight with these two drivers starting the season as they mean to go on. At least that is my hope as we head down towards turn 1 once again. We've seen this downhill braking zone go so wrong for so many drivers in the past. Just ask Valtteri Bottas when it can really go wrong. These two negotiating it absolutely perfectly, side by side once again, as we run down towards turn 4 in just a moment. Turn 3 still to negotiate. In fact, turn 2 still to negotiate, as Matt Daly late on the brakes sees the gap open up, and it's a gap that David opens up quite frequently, I can see, out on track. And it will be interesting to see if he changes that later on into the racing, or whether he's luring Matt Daly into a false sense of security by allowing him to take the position early on the lap, knowing that he can fight it back later on. Matt Daly, meanwhile, 0.3 of a second ahead. That is closing down based on what millisecond we're in. It is so close between these two. They have not let each other go at all. What I will be interested in seeing, though, is how the tyres fare. We know the softs should pretty much, for the most part, get you home. They might drop off late on and become pretty uncomfortable to run on, but they'll certainly be quicker than the mediums overall in terms of overall race pace. It's only if you're a driver like myself who absolutely destroys tyres, you might see the benefit of the mediums. But I doubt these two are focused too much on tyre conservation and tyre strategy, because just look at how close they are, folks. 1/10 of a second separating them. David Chelly has a look to see if he can make a move, stick around the outside. Has to back out, though, because well defended by Matt Daly. Very well judged indeed. Got a slight raise in tarmac temperature to 36 degrees there. Slight pickup in the wind, as well as you can see in the top right-hand corner of your screen, ladies and gentlemen. Not too much change. You know, all of the changing is happening in the positions, in the battling here at the front end of the field. What this battling is doing is slowing these drivers down. We know they've got a little bit more pace in their toolbox, if you will, than a 151.7 or a 152 or a 152.4, as David posted last time out. But as they go side by side into turn 1, let's see what Matt Daly can do. He goes late on the brakes, inside line, textbook move, but does he open that back up to David Chelly, who seems to have a bit more momentum on the straight? I think he will. He closes that gap, does David. They make contact, closing that gap side by side. But it's Matt Daly with the inside line, late on the brakes, though, trying to box him off. I think Matt Daly, textbook move there. Not textbook, rather, a bit sneaky. Very clever thinking from Matt Daly. Just keeps David Chelly at bay for the meanwhile. What can David do now to get to the slightly tighter, twistier part of the circuit? He has a nose up the inside there of turn 4. Has to back out of it, though, because you run off wide onto the infield before we continue on. What I was saying at the start of the lap, what this battling does promote, though, is it allows the other drivers behind to close up, because they are slowing each other down by the tune of about 0.7 to 1 second a lap with all this battling. And as I said many times already in this race, I certainly hope it doesn't stop, because it's fantastic stuff. But what it is doing is allowing Andy Craker and Alan Matthews to close right up and keep that fight going, when otherwise they might not have been showing that pace in qualifying. They are certainly on the level in the racing here, so don't count out the likes of Andy Craker and Alan Matthews. We know just how elbows out this battle has been between David Chelly and Matt Daly so far, and it's going to be just that little bit more now as we head up towards turn 12 here. Matt Daly taking a bit of a curve there, the car up on 2 wheels, typical touring car stuff. And now it's going to be David Chelly trying to find a way around the outside of turn 13 here. Obviously the switchback happens before we run up the right-hander of turn 14 to complete the lap, but will he be able to make that move stick? It is fantastic stuff between these two, but anything could go wrong, and then there's going to be Andy Craker and Alan Matthews right in the mix as we head back onto that start finish straight after a quick look at the medical centre once more. And it is David Shelley in the lead here. It's not quite David Shelley in the lead, actually. It's still David Shelley in P2. Matt Daly defending the inside here. Could he open it up? No, he seems to have control as we run down towards turn 2 in just a moment. I think it's a difference in driving style, to be honest, what we're seeing. This difference in how the drivers are attacking these corners. Matt Daly's looking slightly more vulnerable into turn 1, but he's able to fight it back usually against David Shelley. But what David has done there is he's used Matt's own tricks against him to try and take back the lead of the race. But Matt Daly had the perfect response there, running through turn 2 and turn 3, and it's still Matt Daly in the lead of this race. A exhilarating 10 minutes to start this race so far. We're not even halfway through, I am pleased to report, and we've got so much more action yet to come, because here we go, it's Andy Craig and Alan Matthews right in the mix now. Half a second behind these two. They are considered now in this battle for P1. They might not be door-to-door just yet, but they are certainly in the mix, putting that pressure on David Shelley at the moment. These two drivers are clearly experienced, clearly know what they're doing, and will know of the presence of Andy Craig and Alan Matthews in their rear view mirrors. And that might adjust how they go about this battle now. They might be thinking, come on, it's time to work together and make sure we are battling for P1 and not battling for P3, as they do actually trade paint there as David Shelley crosses back towards the inside line for turn 12. Late on the brakes, copies Matt Daly's move from the previous lap, and is in fact able to take P1 briefly. No, he's not, because Matt Daly takes it back, but here we go. It's going to be Andy Craig now with a shout at the inside line here. He takes P2. Does Andy Craig? Not going to say out of nowhere, because that's been building for a little while, but he pounced at the right opportunity. Too late on the brake, so I think locking up that front axle, that's cost him running through turn 14. He has to back out, loses that momentum, is still in the mix here, but it is for P3, not for P2 this time around. In fact, no, he's going to still be side by side. What can Andy Craig do now? This could be exactly what Matt Daly needs in this race to try and break free of David Shelley. Now it's going to be Andy Craig fighting it out side by side. What we'd see in the karting world, or at least the endurance karting world, is if you're in a position like Matt Daly and David Shelley were, the double tap on the helmet says, come on, think, work together. And there's contact between Andy Craig and David Shelley. Andy Craig, you can tell, was diving on those brakes, doing his utmost to try and make sure he was slowing down in time to stay away from David Shelley, but it just wasn't to be in the end. And unfortunately, that is disaster for Andy Craig. He is back underway, still in P4, so not, in terms of points at least, all that much lost, but certainly a bit of pride and a bit of momentum. So a great shame for Andy Craig there. David Shelley is still in P2, I'm pleased to report, so he was not, in the grand scheme of things, affected all that much after that slight incident. Just a simple racing incident there, really. And David Shelley is able to continue on ahead of Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews running P3 at the moment. Yeah, as I was saying, the double tap on the helmet usually tells you, come on, let's work together. Let's make sure that we are still fighting for this position in a few laps' time. Let's not compromise each other's races. We can both benefit each other. We didn't see that from David Shelley and Matt Daly, and we saw, I think, at least a little bit of that from Andy Craig and Alan Matthews. They did close that gap. They weren't going too out and out in the fight, but unfortunately, that four-way battle is now potentially a three-way battle. But Matt Daly, for the first time in this race, has built up just that little bit of margin as we head across the halfway mark of this exciting race to start off this season. Heading back onto that start-finish straight now. Elsewhere in the field, we do see Steve Knight and Jack Hodson running up through turn 12 now. Jack Hodson, 155.3, his previous lap, his best lap being 154.1. Steve Knight on the 156s on his previous lap, with a 155 being his best. So we should be seeing a decent little battle brewing here in just a moment. There is Guy Swarbrick in the mix as well, so let's not count him out. He's on a bit of a charge at the moment. His best lap by quite some margin will be coming up in just a moment, and there is a 154.5, so that matches, in fact beats Jack Hodson on that previous lap. So we could be seeing a three-way battle here for P6 in just a moment. In fact, there goes Jack Hodson late on the brakes down the inside. Actually, that's cost him a bit too much, too late on the brakes rather, for Steve Knight, sorry, for Jack Hodson, and we now see Steve Knight running in P6 once again, but that is a very, very late dart towards the inside there. Well defended though by Steve Knight, it must be said. So Jack Hodson is going to have to try harder to try and find a way past the experienced Steve Knight in that purple and yellow liveried car. Up towards turn 4 and 5 in just a moment, and what this battling could be doing, as we've just discussed for the front runners here, is it could be allowing Guy Robbie to catch up just that little bit more. He had some decent pace underneath him on the last lap, so I imagine he will be closing up in no time at all, as Jack Hodson must be feeling Steve might be a little bit of a cork in the bottle at the moment. As soon as he can find a way past, he might be able to set his sights on the likes of Paul Millman if there is enough time. Just looking at Jack's pace at the moment, 54.6, Paul's time a 56.2. So with 10 minutes left, certainly just about possible if the wind blows in the right direction and the stars align for Jack to catch up with Paul Millman. That all depends though on Jack Hodson being able to get past Steve Knight, and currently that is not the case, so we'll see if Steve is able to continue on that fantastic momentum in this race. 9 minutes to go in this session now, and Matt Daly has had a good control of things since David got embroiled in that battle with Andy Craker. Obviously, a slight bit of impact there. I don't believe there was any substantial damage on the car, so sorry, David, to take that racing driver excuse away from you. But yeah, Matt Daly at the moment controlling things well. Last lap, a 151.410, actually his best lap of the race so far. 4 tenths of a second faster than David Jelly previous time around, and about 3 tenths faster than David's absolute best lap. So Matt in control of things and settling into a decent rhythm here now, as we see Alan Matthews in, not going to say complete no man's land because he's still in the mix here, and as we saw, he did gain from anything can happen out in front. David and Andy having that slight coming together has promoted Alan Matthews now into P3 in this race. So a debut podium for this, or not a debut podium, but just a podium to start off the season would be very nice indeed for Alan Matthews. Good way to start the championship standings. Of course, it all reverses though for the reverse grid race coming up in a few minutes time after race 1 comes to its conclusion. We'll have a slight break and then jump into race 2, where the starting order at least is reversed from the results of race 1. So Matt Daly and David Shelley come home P1 and P2. They'll be starting right at the back of the field. It promotes a bit more fairness, a bit of an opportunity for drivers who feel like their qualifying might have been compromised or an issue might have occurred in the race. Gives them a chance to fight out in the front, and also makes for some fantastic action, as you see those drivers who've scored very well in race 1 with the capability to put in some fantastic laps. They might do an absolute number in race 2, the reverse grid race, and show us some fantastic action as they work their way through the field. So we look forward to that. But what a fantastic race this has been so far already to start this season. I mean, you can't ask for better than a blockbuster battle between David Shelley and Matt Daly, the championship contenders from the previous season. That's a bit like seeing Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton heading back after 2021 and immediately jumping back into 2022 and fighting it out once again in race 1. It's not quite what we saw, unfortunately, as things transpired, but we do at least see it here in our touring car action. And we're not even halfway through yet, but in case this isn't enough action for you, reminder, our calendar now follows the consistent formatting of the fortnightly racing pairs. So we've got the touring cars followed by the Formula Alpha series. Will stay at the same venue. So up next we'll have the Hungaroring next week in our Tartus Formula Alpha 1.4 multi-air powered cars. So that will be some more fantastic action. A car that's maybe a bit more traditionally used here at the Hungaroring. So we'll see what exciting action that brings us in a week's time. But still, we've got some fantastic action here in the Giuliettas. 2 seconds now the gap between Matt Daly and David Jelly. 3 tenths of a second still there at the delta in terms of outright pace. Matt Daly starting to back off in terms of pace ever so slightly now, but David still very close with only 1/10 separating them in terms of current pace on that last lap. Could be anyone's game still. We've got 5 minutes to go in this race. That is at least 3, maybe 4 more laps, probably more like 3. So that means that there are the current delta. We'll see how it changes, because if the momentum swings towards David Chelly by half a second, 1 second maybe, he is going to be closing up and could still be seeing a battle for the front end of the field. Having a look elsewhere out on track, Paul Millman currently running in P5. He certainly is in a bit of no man's land, has got no pressure from behind and is a little bit away back from the likes of Andy Craker. So he's running very nicely in P5, which will be a fantastic way to start the season for Paul there. Going back and forth though with Steve Knight, and it looks to be that maybe Jack has finally found a way past. No, once again, Steve Knight, by just staying cool, calm and collected, keeps his composure into first corner. He knows that Jack Hodgson's going to try and go for that dive down the inside as we saw earlier on, but knows if he just keeps his line comfortable, keeps the pace up good, looks after the car, he'll be able to take that position back. But Jack Hodgson was going deep into the corner as you saw previously and costing him big time as he run down to turn 2. So that is certainly something that Jack Hodgson might be wanting to try and iron out for race 2, or certainly needs to try and iron out now before come towards the end of this race. He tries to find a way past Steve Knight. Big contact though between Steve Knight and Jack Hodgson. I'm not quite sure if Steve really saw that Jack Hodgson was there. He did close up to Jack Hodgson and was there. He was alongside, had that nose potentially even out in front, maybe not quite that far, but certainly was side by side. And unfortunately, just a brief coming together. The grand scheme of things, no major ill effects, I'm pleased to report, because Jack Hodgson is able to continue on. I think a little bit of damage to the front end of the car by the looks of things. At least that's what showed up on the timing system there. But he does stay ahead of Steve Knight, does Jack Hodgson, and what this has done is brought Guy Swarbrick just that little bit closer now. It's now Guy Swarbrick's chance to try and fight for P7 here. A couple of laps to go in this race still, so we'll see if he's able to close up and complete that overtake. In terms of the pace actually between Guy Swarbrick and Steve Knight, they are neck and neck at the moment, it must be said. Steve Knight a 154.995, Guy Swarbrick 154.983, so only a 100th of a second separating those two drivers on the previous lap. In terms of their outright pace, Guy Swarbrick's about 0.4 of a second faster, but I doubt we're going to be seeing all that much outright pace at the moment. We usually see the pace drop off fairly linearly as, you know, the car, not quite that actually, the cars are fairly heavily laden with fuel but have some decent tyres still on them. A few laps later, you might see that pace improve because the fuel load begins to drop but the tyres are still healthy. Then the pace begins to drop off ever so slightly because, yes, the fuel load's dropping, but the tyres have lost their edge, if you will. You'll then see that pick back up ever so slightly as the fuel load hits a completely low, a fairly low point now, where it's not too much of an effect on the car's handling characteristics, but there's still just enough life left in the tyres for them to still be usable. So you'll see some decent laps start to pour in once again, and then the pace begins to drop off once again as, yes, the fuel load is low, but the tyres are towards the end of their usable life, shall we say, and are completely used up. So that we've crossed that point now. Now we're heading into that phase of it's just a case of bring the cars home towards the end of this 25-minute race. Of course, 25 minutes plus 1 lap, so if the timer still has enough time left in it, we'll go around and complete 1 full lap. That's just to make sure that the race finishes at the correct point out on track where the checkered flag is at the start-finish line, and it doesn't end at some boring other point halfway around the circuit, because we don't want to see that. We want that photo finish for a fantastic evening's racing. We haven't completed race 1 yet, but it's been a brilliant evening's racing so far. That battle out at front was a fantastic way to start the season running. Matt Daly still leading this race, and we haven't looked at him for all that long, but still leading the race by a fairly comfortable margin. Now, I say comfortable, it's around about 3 seconds. That is easily surpassable if anything were to happen late on into the race. But still, seems to be in control rather nicely out in front. David Chelly running in P2 at the moment, ahead of Alan Matthews running in P3. Andy Craker P4, Paul Millman P5, and we have Jack Hodgson, Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick rounding out our competitors still out on track. Rosie Oliver is in the pit, so she's retiring from this race at least, but hopefully we'll see her in race 2, the reverse grid race coming up next. So that's 1 minute to go now on the timer, and it's just a case of bringing it home now for the likes of Matt David and Daly Chelly. No, apologies there. Matt Daly and David Chelly as we head up towards turn 13 once again. Slight bit of contact out on track there between, I believe that was Steve Knight and Jack Hodson. Once again, these two just can't seem to escape each other. They enjoy each other's company out on track. We're going to see more of it in the reverse grid race, but well played to Steve Knight for holding off Jack Hodson for now. You know, there were a couple of incidents in there, but still keeping up some decent pace, so hopefully he carries that momentum further into the season. And a hello there to Stevie, who has commented out on the YouTube comment section live watching here, who asks the very good question actually of what engines are these cars running. Well, I can tell you they are a familiar engine to an Alfa Romeo fan. It is the 1.75 litre turbo 4-cylinder, an engine that has been in use for many decades actually in various forms, sometimes with 5 cylinders even, but it is perhaps most famous for its use in the Giulietta QV as the time it does hit 0 actually as we start our penultimate lap of this race. But it is an engine that is perhaps most well known in the likes of the Giulietta QV, the 159 TBI, lovely specification car if you can find one, very rare, and the Alfa Romeo 4C, of course. So that is a 340 horsepower state of tune for this engine, and it is a fantastic unit as well. Certainly plenty of oomph to bring these drivers home. Of course, powered with 6-speed sequential box, as is touring car tradition, really. And other than that, it is just a variation on the regular road car, albeit a fairly heavy variation, it must be said. As we head around the final corner with Matt Daly now, that time is already on 0. The leader now starts the final lap of the race, so let's stay on board with Matt Daly for what should be a bit of a parade lap. Really, he had to put in all that work to take the lead early on in this race. It was close quarters at the very start, enjoying that battle for so long, nearly half race distance. We saw that out-and-out battle, that out-and-out scrap for P1, and in the end, Matt Daly, who came out on top. It was at one point a 4-car battle, and since then, Matt Daly has controlled the pace here, and that is certainly no mean feat, because they would have taken out plenty from their tyres early on in that battling, and now, as we head into that second phase of the race, it became about him managing his pace while also keeping David Chelly behind, because let's not forget, David Chelly is certainly no slow driver, took the championship in 2024 in the second half, hoping to try and do that here in 2025, but that effort had been slightly slowed down by Matt Daly's incredible start to the season. So we head now through towards the final part of the lap once again with Matt Daly. He's just heading up through the likes of turn 8 and turn 9 now, where we get a slightly flatter running, shall we say. It's one of the more smooth, more stable parts of the lap before we jump up towards turn 11 and turn 12, where we rise up towards the start-finish straight once more. You can just see now that platform on the car starting to become a bit less responsive, starting to give up, not responding to the driver's input as it squirms across the track surface. I'm not sure Matt Daly's focused all that much on exactly how the car is performing at 100% pace, though. He's focused on just bringing this car home now to complete what will be an impressive race start, in fact a season start as well. So as he heads around that final corner, he nurses that car home, and I know exactly what the celebration is going to be, because it's Matt Daly. It's a familiar celebration, because once again it will be Matt Daly who takes the checkered flag to take race victory as well. What a way to start the season. Congratulations, Matt Daly. But let's not forget about the impressive effort that David Chelly and Alan Matthews also put in there to get some fantastic results and round out the podium as they weave in celebration across the line. A flash of headlights for David Chelly there as Alan Matthews was getting closer and closer. It must be said, a few more laps, and I think we might have been seeing some different results. Andy Craker then does bring the car home in 4th position in the end. A mighty battle. It could have been more. He certainly had the pace, but we'll see what he can do in the reverse grid. Coming up next is David Chelly. It's getting rather exuberant with the celebrations there as we fall into Giulietta Demolition Derby, and we enter the 5th dimension where we lose the sky. So that's a dive back into the pits for Andy Crager. Matt Daly is doing his now traditional victory drifts. We've seen plenty of victory donuts in the past from Matt Daly. Slightly more difficult in his front-wheel drive cars, although not impossible, I might add. So now we get to see the Matt Daly victory drifts as he heads across the line there. I don't believe he uses any handbrake to do these, because I asked him, or I think I mentioned it on stream at some point last season, but no, he's just upsetting the balance of the car to do this. So fairly skillful to get a front-wheel drive car to do this and do it nicely. Surely that must have been a bit of handbrake, though. Saw how much opposite lock he put on Now, I must stop before we continue fully into Formula Drift as we bring the rest of the field home there. So Paul Millman also rounding out the top 5 from this race. What a race it was, and I'm pleased to report we've got more coming up in a few moments. Don't go anywhere, folks. After this break, it will be race 2, the reverse grid race here at Hungaroring. So here we are, just about to start the race, actually, as we do have 6 red lights on the gantry, and the timer hits 0, and it is a good start there for Jack Hodson and Paul Millman on the front row of the grid. 3 wide, though, for Andy Craker, Alan Matthews, and Paul Millman. Then it's Matt Daly, David Jelly. It's also 3, and in fact, make that 4 wide as we run down towards turn 1. David's going to go aggressive into that first corner, but well defended by Andy Craig, who's side by side with Jack Hodson to try and keep Andy at bay. Door banging there between the 2 front runners in this race so far, as we see Guy Swarbrick and Rosie Oliver here at the back end of the field battling it out, but we go on board with Andy Craker. Gets forced off ever so slightly wide there, and that is an unfortunate slight bit of contact that might have cost him a bit of momentum at the start of this race. Now we run down towards the first couple of corners. Sorry, turn 3, turn 4 coming up next. A slight bit more contact throughout the field, but all in all, for a reverse grid race, a relatively clean start. Let's see, we do await the timer to rejoin the chat, but hopefully when it does, it'll give us some information on what is going on throughout the entire field. I can tell you, Jack Hodson currently leading this race. We're on board, though, with Matt Daly as he tries to find a way past Paul Millman, rather. Currently running in P6 is Matt Daly. David Chelly was an almighty force at the start of this race, worked his way up through towards turn 1 and found himself currently in P2, but now currently in the lead of this race. Andy Craker then, we're on board with at the moment, currently running in P3. Lost a bit of time, as we said, that slight unfortunate incident, and now is settling for P3 on the road, but should hopefully still have some decent momentum behind it, because Matt Daly and Jack Hodson are going to be in the midst of battle here. Jack Hodson has a bit of a gap up towards the front end of the field. Matt Daly slightly further back, but Paul Millman is very much trying his best to keep up with Matt Daly action. We'll see what the times are looking like in a moment. In terms of their sector times, very close indeed, just a few tenths here or there between Paul Millman and Matt Daly. We'll get a more representative lap as we come towards the end of lap 2. But here we go then. David Chelly leads from Andy Craker as we head down towards turn 1 once again. David Chelly, an almighty feat it must be said, to already be in the lead of race 2 this early on. Usually you'd expect to see them maybe closing up after just a few laps there, but no, he's made the difference all in race 1. What he can do now is just control this race nicely, like exactly what Matt Daly did. Now do just excuse me for one moment. I will probably at some point have to dive off to fix the timing tower, but a very good question coming in from Andrew Brammer. They're asking what's going on with the track limits, and the answer to that is you've watched IndyCar, haven't you? There we go. There's our track limits here, although it is a fairly familiar kind of track limit point on the circuit, if you will, that run up through turn 4, the left-hander, you run off wide ever so slightly. Particularly, I think back to the likes of Formula 1 is kind of 2020, 2021, 2022, 2019, even when track limits were a bit more variable, shall we say, corner to corner, and that was fairly common really to run out wide at turn 4 there. So good question there. But if everyone's doing it, I think it's a fairly even playing field, to be honest. Our drivers are all fairly courteous and friendly with each other, they know, to be fair, and they're all here to enjoy some good racing, so they make sure that happens the best that they can. Alan Matthews is currently running in P3, because here is Matt Daly side by side with Alan Matthews. Timing tower has quite registered that the overtake has happened, but Jack Hodson is back down there in P5. Matt Daly is going to be fighting for P4 side by side with Alan Matthews now as we run up through that final corner. Once more, a quick glance at the medical centre. Unfocus the camera before we dive back onto the start-finish straight. With David Chelly still in the lead of this race by 1.6 seconds now, so a decent margin early on. 5 tenths of a second quicker than Andy Craker on that previous lap time around the circuit. In terms of temperature, dropped by 1 degree, so marginal there really, but it could make the difference. And wind speed also dropping ever so slightly as well, but again very marginal indeed. As that brings it into the first 5 minutes of this race. It is David Chelly ahead of Andy Craker, Alan Matthews, Matt Daly, Jack Hodson, Paul Millman, Guy Swarbrick ahead of Steve Knight and Rosie Oliver rounding out the pack so far in this race. Good to see a better race start for Rosie Oliver though. In this one, she should be able to compete quite nicely. Steve Knight, with that impressive defensive drive that we saw in race 1, doing his best to continue that into race 2. Unfortunately, his rivals from earlier, that is Guy Swarbrick and Jack Hodson, ahead this time around. As we see now, Matt Daly trying to find a way past Jack Hodson here. Sorry, not Jack Hodson. That's going to catch me out a few times. Matt Daly trying to get ahead of Alan Matthews as we run through the mid part of the lap. It's turn 9 and turn 10 coming up next. And it is Matt Daly still in the lead so far. And we join back the action now as we head towards the end of the lap. Actually, still on board with Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick here. Steve Knight closing up that gap to Guy Swarbrick on the last lap. In fact, identical times. So 155.088 and 155.088 for both drivers there, as we now see Matt Daly finds a way past Jack Hudson. Oh, sorry, now finds a way past Alan Matthews. Do a shot every time I make that mistake in race 2. And didn't quite work out, unfortunately, as we ran through that first corner. Matt Daly, once again, seems to be thwarted by that first corner. It seems to be his Achilles heel on this lap. If he was to pinpoint any of them, he's mighty impressive throughout the lap there, as we see Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick making slight contact. Steve Knight just too late on the brakes, wasn't able to derate the car quite quick enough, and unfortunately that is Steve Knight now back towards the bottom end of the pack, running in P9 at the moment. Andy Craker, though, currently running in P2, setting purple sectors out at the front end of the field, doing a very nice job indeed, and is in a comfortable position at the moment. He will be trying his best to close up to the likes of David Chelly, but is comfortably ahead of Alan Matthews. Isn't quite able to match what David Chelly is doing at the moment. Let's go on board with David. We haven't seen too much of him so far this race, but I can tell you that David is lapping very nicely indeed. A 150, that's 150.878, the fastest lap we have seen in a competitive session this weekend. So that is faster than qualifying, if my memory serves me correctly. I'll get the official stats on that for you in just a moment's time, but still an impressive run nonetheless. David Chelly controlling this race nicely done. In fact, yes, that was 0.4 of a second faster than his effort in qualifying, and he's done that with a decent tank of fuel on board the car and a couple of laps taken out of the tyres already. So that just goes to show he's controlling this race nicely as he comes across the line. Builds that gap to Andy Craker. Only by about a tenth, though, must be said. Andy is keeping up the best that he can. Alan Matthews running in P3. Will be another great result for him after a podium to start off the season, if you can replicate that again. Matt Daly still running in P4 at the moment, behind Alan Matthews. So while the others have had an impressive surge throughout the field, Matt Daly, who we've seen so many times in the past work wonders in terms of working his way up through the pack, just hasn't quite been able to do it so far. We are less than half race distance in, though, so do not count him out at all. If anyone can do it, certainly will be Matt Daly. This is Matt Daly, of course, who often isn't able to qualify or be there for the full qualifying session, so will often start right at the back for race 1, work his way up and battle for P1 in the first race, and then has reverse grid, so has it all to do again, and he pulls it off. So let's see what Matt can do here. But he does have a formidable opponent in the form of Alan Matthews. Let's not forget that 0.6 of a second for these two drivers. That is the gap at the moment, as we see Jack Hodson is ahead of Paul Millman and Rosie Oliver. Rosie Oliver having a few issues on that lap, but by the looks of things, she'd worked her way up nicely, but tumbles back down towards 8th now, so hopefully she'll be able to stay there and maybe recover a few positions later on into the race. We haven't seen too much of her race pace, actually, because apart from qualifying, we didn't really see much of her at all. In fact, we barely saw any of her in qualifying. In qualifying, she set a 157.3. In the racing, she's currently running with a 155.5 as her current pace, but best laps so far are 154.1, which puts her quite nicely in the mid-pack of this action. So hopefully, with the remaining 15 minutes, she can put in a good effort here. Andy Craker looks to be trading positions. I think that was just a timing error, though, because there are still 3 seconds separating these two drivers. Alan Matthews running in P3, a few tenths ahead of Matt Daly. Closest cars out on track at the moment are Guy Swarbrick and Rosie Oliver. 0.8 of a second separating these two. Running in P7 at the moment is Guy Swarbrick. Rosie Oliver running down in P8. 154.1 for Rosie Oliver, 154.2 rather for Guy Swarbrick. Their fastest laps respectively there. But Rosie Oliver, it must be said, has that slight edge in terms of pace at the moment. So we could be on for a good battle between these two. Still very close quarters, though, between Matt Daly and Alan Matthews as we head up towards the end of the lap once again. Here is a turn 12, late braking zone, less than 100 metres before you dive into the corner. Going slightly wider is Matt Daly, trying to find a way past. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews doing an almighty defensive job here. Something that he wasn't quite able to do against Andy Crager in the previous race, but has now been able to show his defensive skills off here in race 2. Big disaster, though, for Andy Crager here in this race as he was heading through the mid-part of the lap there. Apologies, no, it wasn't quite the mid-part. That was running down into turn 2. Andy Crager finds himself off track. An issue was had in race 1 there with David Chelly in the mix. And Andy Crager lost position as a result, dropped down to P4. And once again here in race 2, he secures his place in P4, is able to continue on. Luckily, a police report, so deja vu there as well. But nonetheless, not what you want really at this phase of the weekend. You've got to try and build some decent points. The points tally, of course, after the first race isn't all that exciting, really, because not much has happened. The points tally is pretty much what the order of the race was. In fact, it is exactly what the order of the race was. So it's Matt Daly leading this championship so far, ahead of David Chelly, Alan Matthews, Andy Crager, Paul Millman, Jack Hodson, Steve Knight, Guy Swarbrick and Rosie Oliver are 9 cars finishing race 1. And the order is, it must be said, is looking very similar here in race 2. Rosie Oliver finishing 8th, well, at least at the moment, currently running in 8th ahead of 9th where she was in the previous race, although she's trying to close that up. And then, yeah, everyone else looking very similar in terms of the order in the race. Matt Daly now ahead of Alan Matthews. Meanwhile, Andy Crager running in P4. David Chelly building a nice 8-second gap in this race, though. So that's a gap that just didn't quite see from Matt Daly out in front of race 1. We saw only a gap of around about 6 seconds at most there. So Matt Daly, while putting in an impressive effort, is going to be outdone in terms of how much he controlled the pack. As in race 2, David Chelly really put the work in lap 1, but effectively made it not a reverse grid race for him. Because by the first couple of corners, there he was, right at the front. If anything, the odds were more favourable for him in the reverse grid race because he didn't have Matt Daly to contend with so early on. And this is really going to hot up that championship, because it means if the points stay as they are, that they will be on level points at the end of round 1 here at the Hungaroring. And of course, round 2, we do visit a rather infamous circuit, and it will be good even in Touring Car Circuit Spa-Francorchamps. A fantastic racing venue. I very much look forward to that one. It is actually on my birthday, that one, Wednesday the 29th of January. So while I would like to do something for my birthday, nothing concrete plans just yet. So what I'm hoping is that I'll certainly got the day off work at least, so I'm hoping that I will be around, because I don't want to miss some commentary at Spa. Spa's a fantastic venue. But of course, if that is missed and that isn't streamed by myself, fear not, because the week after I will be streaming it, because the Formula Alpha Series will be racing, of course, at Spa. A reminder that the calendar is congruent between the 2 championships. So you see the touring cars visit a venue one week, the next week it will be the Formula Alphas there. And you know there's going to be a venue change because it will be the touring cars again, followed immediately by the Formula Alphas at the same venue the week after. Of course, each championship running on a bi-weekly basis. David Chelly still leading this race as we approach the final 10 minutes now. 8 seconds that margin between David Chelly and Matt Daly. We've got Alan Matthews running in P3 at the moment. Another podium would put an impressive start into the championship running. It'd actually be quite interesting. In fact, that will make Alan Matthews 2nd or 3rd in this championship, because of course it will be David Chelly and Matt Daly with equal results. So it'll be David Chelly in 1st with a 2nd in race 1, but then a 1st in race 2 if things stay how they are. But Matt Daly with a 1st in race 1 and then a 2nd in race 2 if things stay how they are. So that will be, they are equal in terms of points and equal in terms of their standings, because we've got the same number of results. Now, if it came to a championship, I believe we'd used old Formula 1 rules, where if they were to score the same number of wins, same number of points, it would come to who scored those wins first, if I'm not mistaken. I could be making that completely up, but we don't have to worry about that just yet. We're only at round 1. Alan Matthews, regardless, will be classified as second in the championship because of where he has scored those consistent podiums, and it is that consistency which rewards you so much in the championship running. So it'll be interesting to see how things shape up. A very different circuit, though, coming up in a fortnight's time. Spa, of course, wildly different to the tighter, twistier nature of the Hungaroring. And just a quick look into what the calendar is going to be looking like this year. We've got Hungary, we've then got Spa, we then visit Zandvoort, then we visit, well, that would have been Baku, we now actually visit Mugello instead of round 4. So if you've got Baku in your diary, scrub that out. As fantastic as it is, and as much as I want to go there at some point, it will actually be Mugello instead. Then we're on to the Losail circuit in Qatar, then it's Australia, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Miami, Imola, Monaco, and Barcelona. So as the Formula 1 calendar picks back up, we start to echo exactly what the Formula 1 calendar is doing. So that mark around about Qatar, Australia, obviously season opening in Australia for Formula 1, we start to take a more similar calendar to what the Formula 1 calendar is doing. And it serves as a good reminder, you know, obviously what's coming up on a Sunday. Obviously you might be following the Formula 1 calendar and then you think, Wednesday, the touring cars in Formula Alpha will be doing the same thing as well. Of course, the inverse could very well be true. And yeah, so if you see a track that you quite like the look of in the world of Formula 1, why not give it a go here in the AROC Racing Leagues as well. Of course, the best way to get involved is just ping us a message, really, if you want to get involved. You're more than welcome to join our Discord. Invite links are around about on Facebook, as we see Rosie Oliver taking the inside line there into the first corner ahead of Guy Swarbrick. Now, that is an overtake that's been brewing for a while, and I know Guy is certainly going to fight for it. Let's see how it plays out. Late on the brakes goes Guy Swarbrick, taking that outside line there, but just ever so slightly boxing off Rosie. That is a fantastic move there. Not too traditional to see the overtake being completed around the outside there. So props to Guy Swarbrick for pulling that one off. And it's Guy Swarbrick running in P7 at the moment. But yes, that is the man to message, really. Aside from myself, please do feel free to message, or anyone else that you might know who's a contact within the AROC Racing Leagues who is a competitor. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you out if you're an AROC member, or even not. Even if you're watching along, you can still get involved. Actually, you just won't be eligible for prizes. You can still certainly get involved. Give us a message, get in touch, even a comment on this YouTube video if you will. And yeah, get involved, enjoy some racing, and have some fun, because it has been fantastic fun out here on track so far this evening. 6 minutes to go in this race. Guy Swarbrick and Rosie Oliver, our closest competitors, out on track at the moment. Matt Daly and Alan Matthews out in the front end of the field, 1 second apart in this racing so far. In fact, make that 1.5 seconds, as Matt Daly seems to be on a bit of a charge. We did see earlier on, and in fact still at this moment, Matt Daly has the ever slight upper hand in terms of pace at the moment, has perhaps a little bit more grip in the car. We saw Matt Daly was being a little bit more, I'm not going to say careful in his driving style, but was just being slightly more gentle on the car, I will say, compared to David, at least what the glimpses that we saw in their battle earlier on. And I think that is rewarding Matt in terms of the tyre condition late on in the race. Still though, the pace delta is very minimal indeed, so he still would have to work it out, would Matt Daly, to close up that gap with just 5 minutes to go in this race. So instead, let's focus on the battle going on here for P7, as Rosie Oliver has a look down the inside there, but can't really do anything from that far back, so stays where she is for now in that fantastic blue and green liveried car there. Meanwhile, it is going to be Guy Swarbrick in the livery, the OP Oils livery, that actually echoes my own livery in the Alpha 75 we got parked in the pit lane. And that he is adorning his car with. I should add, actually, I've quipped many a time about how the Alpha 75 is the world's most poorly looked after Alpha 75, in fact, because it just sits there idling all day, and that poor engine is not going to enjoy that all that much. It sits there idling, probably getting quite warm, probably, you know, wearing out some of its cams with just how much it just sits there idling, and it will slightly lower oil pressure. But I'm pleased to report my Alpha 75 has now had some running out on track, because around 1 of the Tasman series, in practice and qualifying, I was quite a late entrant. I always like to make Guy Swarbrick's life difficult, so it seems, and I did the same thing there by joining and entering. I knew I was going to join, but I just put my entry in quite late. So that meant that when it came to it, the server wasn't quite updated yet. Guy Swarbrick very courteously restarted the session to make sure I was in the right car. But before that, I was practicing in very much the wrong car. We were in the Ralt RTL3, the old 70s Formula 3000 car, or Formula 3 car. And I was running along in my Alfa 75, which was a very nice driving car, it must be said. So it was nice to open the taps on that car for the first time ever, really. That poor car has got a running. It's had its first running, or it's had its only running for 4 years, so now it can go back into the pit lane for the 4 years before we need to break it out once again. Anyway, it is 4 minutes now left to go in this race. Guy Swarbrick ahead of Rosie Oliver for the time being. Jack Hodson jumps ahead of Paul Millman. It looks like Paul Millman might have had an issue out on track. There was contact between the two here, so we're going to stay on board with these two drivers as they enjoy their battle now. Paul Millman running in P5 at the moment, a couple of tenths ahead of Jack Hodson. What can Jack do, though? In terms of pace, Jack was certainly slower last time around. In terms of outright pace, Jack Hodson 4/10 of a second faster. And there we see Paul Millman going ever so slightly wide. Jack Hodson says thank you very much and takes the position now up to P5 for Jack Hodson. Slightly tighter lines over the curbs there for Paul Millman. Paul Millman being a bit braver with those curbs. They might look quite gentle from here on our TV camera angle, folks, but I can tell you, particularly when you're in the car, they are not forgiving at all. Even those slight ones there do rattle the car a fair bit, and the slightly bigger ones like the sausage curbs or even a slightly highly elevated version of those red and white checkered curbs there can be fairly unforgiving to your car, can really bash up the underside there, potentially knock off bits of the car, and even worse, upset the balance of the car and cause you to spin out. We've seen that plenty of times before. Haven't seen that too much here at the Hungaroring, because on the whole, on balance, they're pretty forgiving at the Hungaroring. There'll be some curbs at the likes of Spa that you want to avoid. Obviously, that's coming up in a fortnight. But overall, quite gentle on the curbs is the Hungaroring. A venue I'm yet to visit myself, although it's certainly on the calendar at some point. Paul Millman then going Jack Hodson heading down into that first corner. Benefits from a tiny bit of slipstream, although not too much in terms of slipstream to be had here in these touring cars. 340 horsepower punches its way through the air, and there isn't that much in terms of barn door aero, as I like to phrase it. There is that wing on the back, but it's nowhere near as effective as something, for example, a Formula 1 rear wing, which, although it's ruthlessly efficient, a Formula 1 wing is still very draggy, if you will, because it still does cause a lot of disturbance to the air. These wings will as well, but we're not quite at those speeds to really have the effects of that. We're around about 110, 120 miles an hour at various points, and not much more than that here at Hungaroring, apart from on that start-finish straight, it must be said. Meanwhile, Rosie Oliver has been able to find a way past Guy Swarbrick, so just as a sibling has been able to get past Paul Millman, Rosie jumps ahead into P7. I say that, and that is a bit of commentator's curse, folks. Our first commentator's curse of the season, I am pleased to report. And I'm sorry to the other drivers, as Jack Hodson does find his way past back into P5 now. Paul Millman running ever so slightly wide there. We were pretty clear of commentator's curse in the second half of 2024, it must be said. 2023 and early 2024 were particularly bad, so things returning to normal by the looks of things, but hopefully this is not a sign of how things will look to continue on. Paul Millman runs in P6 then at the moment. Just look at those tyres not responding to what the drivers are asking of them. That front axle was being completely rotated and the car was still just ploughing forward. That is the tyres looking to give up there. As we saw Jack Hodson going quite deep into that corner there. Hopefully that does not occur again. As you see him jump back onto that start-finish straight, the timer does hit 0. This is the penultimate lap of this race. David Chelly is currently running around turn 5 at the moment. That is in fact turn 5. So we are going to have pretty much two full final laps here. As we saw Jack Hodson then into turn 1, goes deep into the corner, as we saw Matt Daly doing a couple of times, and Jack actually do there at that place on the circuit. To quote one of my absolute favourite Martin Brundle lines there, that is ambition over adhesion really causing that one. Just trying to go as late on the brakes as possible. The tyres just simply not having the grip, not having the adhesion left in them to do exactly what the driver is asking of, keep that car on the road under those conditions. So that causes Jack Hodson still actually into P5 now, because he was able to find a way past Paul Millman, but this is going to be a battle, I hope, and I think we'll go on to the very end of this race. So well done to these two for putting on a fight, even though the tyres are giving up, the fatigue will be setting in. Well done to both of those drivers. Slight contact there between Jack Hodson and Paul Millman, although they are able to continue on. Only a very slight 2 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour there. It's touring cars, that's what they're built for. As we now start the final lap of this race, we will jump on board with David Chelly in a moment, but we're seeing some fantastic action here between Jack Hodson and Paul Millman as they continue towards the end of the penultimate lap for these two, and we'll start their final lap in just a moment. David Chelly heading round the second corner on the circuit at the moment, as we see Paul Millman opening up the corner ever so slightly. That might have been an opportunity for Jack Hodson to pounce, although well controlled as we head into that final corner. Defends well. Nothing that Jack could do from here. He's going to have to try his signature late dive into turn one. Paul defends on the inside. That forces Jack to try the outside. Tries to break the slipstream ever so slightly, does Paul, but Jack able to echo him quite nicely, weaving ever so slightly there, making sure there are no advantages going the way of Jack Hodson. Very late on the brakes there. If he gets that to stick, I'll be mighty impressed. He does get that to stick. He gains a substantial amount of time as a result there. What a drive, what an overtake attempt at least from Jack Hodson. Nothing that he can quite do just yet though. As you can see there, that front axle really not responding to the inputs from Paul Millman. Heading now into the middle sector of the lap in just a moment. We'll come to an end in sector. We'll come to the end of sector one rather in just a moment. We're going to have to dip away from this battle to have a look at David Chelly, who has been leading this race for so long. Actually, there might have been an issue for Paul Millman there. He is able to continue on. Backs off though, does Paul Millman. David Chelly though heads round the final couple of corners for what has been an almighty race. He really made that difference on lap one of race two here, where he saw the opportunity. He dived down the inside of turn one, got good track position, and has controlled the race ever since. He weaves across the line, flashes the headlights in celebration. David Chelly takes the checkered flag and takes race two victory. It is blow for blow, victory for victory against Matt Daly and David Chelly in the racing this evening. And speaking of Matt Daly, he comes home P2 to once again put in an almighty drive. Comes home P2, another podium after a race victory. So that is equal points, equal finishes for David Chelly and Matt Daly in round one here at Hungaroring. And speaking of equal finishes, Matt Daly equals his race one finish with another podium here in race two. A great drive overall this weekend. Andy Craker comes home P4 then, with Paul Millman hoping to come home P5 after an almighty battle against Jack Hodson for the final part of this race. We'll see these two now head round that final corner, just a few tenths of a second apart. Commiserations to Jack Hodson there, but it is Paul Millman P5, Jack Hodson P6. A real impressive run for Paul Millman to defend for so long, but congratulations to Jack as well for his efforts there. Rosie Oliver, some slight race issues earlier on, but she has recovered well to P7 there, so a few points in the bag to start off her campaign this season. And then we have Guy Strawberry coming home P8, likewise a couple of points to add to the tally. Everything helps, and he will be able to continue on to Spa in a fortnight's time. But of course we do have the Hungaroring in another week's time, but this time in the Formula Alphas, so slightly different beasts in the entirety there. As you see David Chelly just bringing the car home there. Matt Daly slightly wiggling to bring the car home, but not quite the victory celebration we saw after race one. Although we are going to see some Giulietta Rallycross. We did never get a Giulietta Rallycross in real life. I'm sure someone's going to find me a picture of one now, but we get them here in the AROC Racing Leagues. So that is an exciting end to what has been an exciting evening to kick off the Touring Car Championship. The AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship for 2025 is off to a great start with the evening's racing at Hungaroring. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating as we now enter Formula Drift. We'll see you in a week's time for the Formula Off running here at Hungaroring. Thank you very much for watching, and a good night.